I have always felt I'm on the outside. I've always been different to everybody around me. So I've always felt unseen, on the outskirts, unimportant, worthless. And my life has been hard. I can't tell you of a day that it was easy. I'm an Egyptian. I was born in Egypt, but I don't know my parents. I must have had parents, but I don't remember, for I was sold as a child into slavery. I presume they were really poor and they could not afford me, and the only value I had was to be sold that someone else would raise me and feed me, and one day I would be of use to them. So my earliest memory is in the slave trade quarters, in the marketplace. And the man who I'd been sold to knew I wasn't worth much, because I'm still a child. What value am I to anyone? So he put me together with a whole group of other more more valuable people. And a servant from Pharaoh's palace came down. Pharaoh is the king, the god in Egypt. And he was looking for slaves as a gift to some foreigners who'd come to Egypt. And they'd come up from the land of Canaan because there was famine in the land. And this was a wealthy, wealthy man. He came with servants and livestock, and they had the money to buy food from the fertile Nile Valley where we lived. And he had come with his sister, her name was Sarai. And Pharaoh had seen Sarai, and seen she was beautiful. So he took her for his harem. And in return, he wanted to give Abram, her brother, a gift. So he bought some livestock, some camels, and some slaves. And I was part of the job lot of slaves that went to live and work and be taken care of by Abram. And it was confusing and it was different there. They dress differently, they smell different, their food is different. But I was still at least in Egypt. And in my child's heart, I believed at least maybe one day I would earn my freedom and I could go and find my family and know who I was. I don't even know my birthday. I don't know how old I actually am. I don't even know my given name. Anyway, not long after I arrived, the armed guard came from the palace with probably the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And they came returning Abram's sister to him because everyone in the palace had become incredibly sick. And when Pharaoh had approached his soothsayers and his wise men, they had said, "It's because you have taken a married woman into your harem." She wasn't his sister. She was a cousin. She was his wife. And he had let Pharaoh take her. And the first time I ever saw my new mistress, she was angry, she was hurt, she's so beautiful. She didn't really notice me. But I think to try and appease her, her husband gave me to her as her personal slave. So the word wasn't hard, it was just always. It was running for errands, helping her dress, fetching her water, washing things. It wasn't bad. And she wasn't particularly cruel. She wasn't particularly kind either. And because they could not speak Egyptian, they just named me Hagar, the alien one. And Pharaoh had told them to get out his country. They could keep the gifts, but go, because of their deception. And so they did. So we left Egypt. I've lost everything. My family, my freedom, and now my home. And I missed it. I missed the smell of the Nile River. I missed the coolness. I missed the food. I missed hearing Egyptian spoken. And now I had to learn Hebrew. And no one really cared about me. But I had food. That gnawing in the pit of my belly I'd known from birth was gone. And I had clothing. And I had a shelter. And people are worse off, right? Anyway, they moved to Hebron under the trees of Mamre. And there they set up a little settlement camp, intense but grand. And 10 years passed and I grew. And as beautiful as Sarah was, she was cursed with barrenness. She just couldn't have children. And sometimes I would hear Abram saying to her, our God has promised I will be a father of nations. The children will come, they will come. And at first I would hear her crying in her tent. And then after a while she didn't speak of it. But there was a bitter hurt, a grief deep in her soul. And when other women in the camp, other servants and slaves, had pregnant bellies, could see the pain in her eyes. And her response was harder slaps and hard words. But it was my life. And then one day I was outside the tent washing her clothes. And she was speaking to her husband about not having children. And she just said, I'm done. I'm done waiting. I think it's time we take action. So my hand servant, Hagar, take her. Sleep with her. Go into her. Because she's mine, so her children will be my children. And at least we can start a family like that. And he agreed. And I stood there. He's 86 years old. This is not love. This is I'm just a breeding vessel. Just to be used. And I'm a slave. My opinion is not sought or asked. They don't need my consent. I am their property. So Abram went into me. And I hated it. And I hated it. But my status started to change. Now I'm not just Sarai's maid, slave. I'm Abram's second wife. I thought of all the harsh words, the unkindness, when I'd cried myself to sleep and no one cared. A child with no love. And maybe I showed it. And then I missed my period. And this is a public thing. There's no privacy for slaves. And you'd think Sarai would be pleased. She wasn't really. She became so unkind to me. I didn't want this. I don't want her husband. I haven't seduced him. I don't love him. I don't want to be with an 86-year-old old man to take my virginity. But there will be power with this child. At last, I will have something that is mine. And it will raise my status in this family. Because I am now the mother of the heir. The only child. And Sarai got worse and worse. She was now cruel, unkind, vicious. And I could feel this little being in my belly, and I said, I don't want this life. I never asked for this. I've never been given a choice in anything in my whole life. And I can't bear this anymore. What if I give birth and she just takes it away and I never see the child? She's so vicious, she could do that. So I started to plan, maybe the world out there is not as bad. Maybe I can find my way back to Egypt and find family who would care for me. Surely nothing is as bad as this. So before that, without anything, I was too scared to even take a piece of fruit because if you steal as a slave, they will kill you. So I snuck out. I started to run across the desert and I hoped I'm going in the direction of Egypt. And the heat of the sun was intense. And I hadn't eaten since the night before and I got tired and I was thirsty. And my lips were sticking together. And you know when you're so thirsty that you can't even sweat anymore, there's no moisture left. And I ran and eventually I walked. And eventually I couldn't anymore and I sat down and I started to weep. Because I'm hopeless. I'm hopeless. There's nothing joyful in my life except what I carry. And I don't think I'm going to survive. And as I wept, I heard a voice behind me. Hagar, why do you weep? I turned in astonishment. There was a man. He stood with authority. There was something of kindness in his eyes that I wasn't used to. And I said to him, I've run away from my mistress Sarai. said, but Hagar, you are carrying Abram's son, and he will be the father of a great nation. But you need to go back. You need to return to Sarai and have this child. And part of me did not want to hear this. I did not want to be told to go back. But to know I bear a son, a man of my own, who can care for me, who can give me status. And he said, God of Israel has heard your cry. He has seen your tears and how you suffer. He hears you and he's listening. He sees you, Hagar. He sees me. This God they speak of all the time, he sees me, Egyptian slave girl. He hears me. And so I purposed in my heart to go back. When I crawled back into camp, Sarai mocked me. She kicked me. Ha! You couldn't make it out there. Now you bring your brokenness back here. But I didn't care. For in my heart I know this is a boy. I know Yahweh hears me and he sees me and I count enough to him. She doesn't matter. 7 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And just as that man had told me, I called him Ishmael. Abram loved him. Abram played with him and loved him. And Sarai hated him. She hated me for something I didn't choose. But now I am a mother. I can do what she can't. I have a child by her precious husband. And I have a prophecy from God that says he will be wild like a donkey. He will be a violent man and fight with his brothers. And this tells me he will one day be free. Not just the child of a slave. He's going to be free. I hold on to that with everything I have. And time passes. And we had moved further into the Negev. And while we were there, it's a good 10 years on, some men came to the camp to tell us that they would have this family. And it wouldn't be through Ishmael. That God's promise would come through Sarai. And you know, God changed their names. He changed Abram to Abraham. And he changed Sarai from troublesome, which she certainly deserved, to Princess Sarah. And Sarah laughed in derision. She didn't believe she'd have this child. Husband's 99. And those visitors left and we moved again. And you know what? She became pregnant. And I thought maybe this would take the pressure off me. Maybe now she was really happy. And she's old, she's 100. She's now pregnant with her first child. Oh, you know what I forgot to tell you? Just before this, during our trip through the desert, do you know what that man did again? Even a wealthy man's wife has no status. We came to the city of Hagar, and the king there, his name was King Abimelech. And Sarah was still beautiful. And Abram again said it's his sister, so he took her. And then God came to him in a dream and said, that's a married woman you've taken. And he hadn't slept with her left, so he gave her back. But he also, because he realized God's hand was on them, he'd let us set up camp here in Hagar. And Sarah was pretty angry. To be given away by your husband twice is quite something. Just to give you an idea of the value of women to the men in my land. Anyhow, now she is pregnant. And she's almost pleasant. And I think, well, if she has a child, it'll take that pressure off. She won't hate me so much. The jealousy, maybe it'll go. No, it didn't. She treated me so badly. But I still am Ishmael's mother. And then her precious child was born, and it's a boy. They called him Isaac for laughter. And boy, he was indulged in every way. Anything that child burped and we had to have a party. And my boy is now a teenager, a young teenager. And her boy is about to be weaned, so he's about 4 years old, and he's going to come off breast milk, and we're going to have a party to celebrate. Yay, he's coming off the breast. And I was doing work for the party, and the two boys were over there. And Ishmael was teasing him like brothers do. But Mom saw her precious son being teased. She went off and said to Abraham that we were just a disastrous menace. She didn't want us around. That he must get rid of us. Maybe he still felt bad about giving her away. But at first he said no. And then he said, well, they belong to you, do whatever you like. And so in the morning light, forgetting this is not my choice, forgetting this is his own firstborn son, they gave us enough food and water that we could carry, sent us into the desert. And Abraham said, but God has said he'll be a great nation, so I know he'll be fine. How are we going to be fine? Going into a desert, not even a donkey, not even a camel. Just me and my boy. He's 14 years old. But we are slaves. We have no rights. So we left. And I knew it was that princess didn't want to share the inheritance her son would get with anyone. And my boy is strong. But the desert is stronger. And we walked for days. First our food ran out. And then our water ran out. And then my boy just collapsed. The only thing I have who loves me. And I found a little bush and I pressed him into the shade and I couldn't watch him die. I just can't. I can't. So I went and sat a little way away and I just cried. And as I sat there crying, I heard that same voice. That voice from all those years ago. Hagar, why do you weep? For your son will be the father of a great nation, and I will care for you. And as I looked up through my tears, I saw a well filled with the cleanest, sweetest water. And I ran and I filled my skin and I took it to my boy. And he drank. And then I filled it again and I drank. And somehow this peace settled on me. Yahweh has got me. I don't need to make a plan like Sarah did. Yahweh listens. And he has made a promise and he is going to fulfill it. And as we sat at that well, rehydrating ourselves, we saw a whole caravan of camels approaching. And they were from the desert of Pathan. They gave us food. When I told them my story, they gave us family. They took us in, and we are now a part of their tribe. And they fed us, they clothed us, they made us welcome. And I am free, and my son is raised as a free man. And now I have found for him a beautiful Egyptian wife. And as I sit here, his 12th son has been born, the beginning of the great nation that Yahweh has promised us. And I know that he is the God who hears you. He is the God who sees you and he answers. And he is the faithful God who keeps his promises.
Every moment I spend with you, you're glorified.